Prior to making a recreation trail out of Mojave Road, the Tales of the Mojave Road Publishing Company issued actually 7 different volumes documenting the history of the Mojave Road. And the first one was Carleton's Paiute Campaign. The second one was the battle at Camp Katy. The third one was Camp Rock Spring, California. Then Fort Paiute, California. Then an overview history called The Mojave Road. And then a follow-on volume called The Mojave Road and Newspaper. And finally, a book on Camp Beale Springs, Arizona Territory. The most recent edition of the Mojave Road Guide was published in April of 2010, and it's the first one to have GPS units in it. Here's what it looks like. You want to get the one with a little gold star on the front, because that's the GPS edition. Another important book that we published after we acquired this property in 1990 was to document the history of the schoolhouse itself and the community of Goffs. So that appears in a book, and you will find it on the shelves of our gift shop that we'll talk about a little more later, the history of Goffs and its schoolhouse. Once U.S. Highway 66 got established, and it became the major highway across the Mojave Desert, Goffs began to grow to where in the early teens and continuing until well into 1930s, there were maybe 200-300 people living in Goffs, whereas today there's just 11. But it never has completely died. It has done what we call ghosted, but it has never become a ghost town. There's been people here ever since the early teens. So Goffs became a community, and in 1911, the Goffs School District was formed. And the founders of the Goffs School District very cleverly gerrymandered the boundaries up and down the railroad to include all that taxable property. So they had a lot of money to spend. And in 1914, they built this beautiful schoolhouse. It's very distinctive for the time. In fact, its architectural distinction is one of the elements that enabled us to get it on the National Register of Historic Places. Prior to that time, mission-style architecture was beginning to show up in California schools. But this is a classic example, and it's a very early example. The Goffs School District was formed in 1911, and they had a little frame building that they held classes in until 1914. That little frame building was a couple hundred yards to the south here. A public-spirited citizen built the building and rented it for almost nothing to the school district. Then in 1914, that same person, Henry Peace Ware is his name, donated the acre that the schoolhouse sits on to the school district. And in the summer and fall of 1914, they built this beautiful building. We even know how much it cost. It cost about $2,500. That includes the concrete fences, the outhouses, and this wonderful building. This school building was open for business in the fall of 1914. Question is very frequently asked, how many students did it have? On the order of 20 throughout its existence. Toward the end, had a few more than that. It always had one teacher, 8 grades, one classroom, except toward the end. Toward the end, there were more students, there were 2 teachers here, and the lower grades had their classes in the little room off the main classroom here. Frequently asked, where did the students, the people come from whose children went to school here? There was ranching in this area. In fact, to the north of here, covering more than 1 million acres, was the huge Rock Springs Land and Cattle Company. And at their peak, they grazed 10,000 head of cattle on this desert country. Almost all the mountains that you can see from Goffs here had some kind of mineral deposits in them, so there were miners. And there was an increasing number of people involved in the transportation business, the railroad, the highway. This whole area has been described by a recent scholar as a transit zone, that a good deal of the activity forever and now involved around here is people going from east to west and west to east. In fact, if you go out here tonight and look up at the sky, you'll see a contrail. And it's an airliner inbound to Ontario or LAX. I can almost hear the pilot coming on the PA system and say, we're passing through 20,000 feet. You just went over the Colorado River. The stewardesses will be around to pick up anything you got left on your tray. You go up the hill from Goffs away, and you'll find an underground gas line that's carrying petroleum products from Texas and the Four Corners country to the Los Angeles area. You go over that hill to the south a little bit, there's Interstate Highway 40. So it's a transit zone.